7 Steps to Release, Fear and Embrace Peace, Buddhist Wisdom. Fear is one of the most potent forces that shapes human behavior. It lies beneath anxiety, anger, jealousy, attachment, and even the relentless desire to control outcomes. In Buddhist philosophy, fear is seen not merely as an emotion to be avoided, but as a profound opportunity for inner transformation. By investigating fear, understanding its roots and cultivating the mind, we can release it, and in doing so, embrace a life of authentic peace. This journey is not a surface-level avoidance of discomfort. It is a deep spiritual process that requires self-awareness, mindfulness, and wisdom. In Buddhism, peace is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of clarity, balance, and insight even amidst those challenges. The teachings of the Buddha point us again and again to the same realization: the mind is both the source of suffering and the key to liberation. In this path of 7 transformative steps drawn from Buddhist insights, we will explore how to move from fear toward inner freedom. Each step is a practice, not merely a concept. It is something to be lived, breathed, and integrated into daily life. We begin now with the first step, recognizing the nature of fear. Recognizing the nature of fear. Fear does not begin in the moment of crisis. It begins in the mind, long before any danger appears. The first essential step in releasing fear is to truly recognize its nature, where it arises, how it operates, and how it traps us in cycles of suffering. In Buddhist teachings, fear is closely related to ignorance. When we fail to see reality clearly, when we are entangled in illusions about ourselves, the world, and others, fear arises as a natural result. We fear losing what we are attached to. We fear facing the truth of impermanence. We fear change, uncertainty, and the unknown, because our minds are conditioned to seek stability in a world that is always in motion. To begin transforming fear, we must observe it without judgment. Meditation is the doorway to this observation. When we sit with our own minds in stillness, fear often arises. It comes in many forms: a tightening in the chest, a racing thought, an anxious projection about the future, or an old memory we wish would disappear. These are not random. They are reflections of deeper psychological and karmic patterns. The Buddha encouraged his disciples to practice mindfulness of feelings, to notice when a feeling arises, to recognize whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, and to observe its effect on the mind. When fear is recognized as just another arising phenomenon, it begins to lose its power. We no longer believe it is who we are. We see it as something passing through, not something permanent. This recognition begins to create space. When we are no longer fused with fear, we can see it more clearly. We notice its texture. We begin to see that most of our fears are mental fabrications, stories built upon assumptions, projections, and past wounds. Fear shrinks in the presence of awareness, yet awareness alone is not enough. We must also understand how fear connects to our views and attachments. For example, fear of failure is often tied to an identity that says, "I must succeed to be worthy." Fear of abandonment is linked to a view that says, "I am not whole without someone else." These views, deeply conditioned, are not truths. They are mental formations. When we recognize them, we begin to see the prison we've been living in. The Buddhist path invites us to look fear directly in the eye, without turning away. But it does not ask us to conquer fear with force. Instead, it shows us how to befriend it, to sit beside it, to hear what it is really saying. Many people think that the goal is to eliminate fear entirely, but the goal is subtler than that. The goal is to see through fear, to recognize its empty nature. Just as a mirage disappears when one understands it is an illusion, fear begins to dissolve when we understand its origin in the mind. This recognition is not a one-time event. It is a practice. Every moment of fear is an invitation to return to mindfulness, to breathe, to feel the body, to ask, what is really happening here? This pause can shift the entire experience. One of the profound teachings of the Buddha is that nothing is to be feared but the untrained mind. When the mind is trained, when it sees clearly, when it rests in the present, when it understands impermanence, fear loses its grip. The world remains uncertain, but our relationship to uncertainty changes. This is the power of insight. Insight reveals that fear is not an enemy to be vanquished, but a teacher to be understood. It shows us where we are still clinging, where we are still resisting life, where we are still holding on to identities that do not serve us. This first step, recognizing the nature of fear, plants the seed for all the others. Without this recognition, we are merely reacting. With it, we begin to awaken. To cultivate this awareness, spend time each day in stillness. When fear arises, do not push it away. Name it gently. Fear is here. Observe its sensations. Watch the stories it tells. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing? What do I believe is true in this moment? Let the questions open space, not close it. And remember, the path to peace begins not by avoiding fear, but by turning toward it with eyes wide open and heart steady. If this resonates with you and you wish to continue walking the path of inner peace, mindfulness, and wisdom, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Each week, we dive deeper into the teachings that free us. Your presence supports this journey and the journey of many others seeking the same freedom. Embracing impermanence as the gateway to peace. The human heart longs for permanence. It seeks consistency, stability, and a sense of control over the unfolding of life. We crave relationships that will never change, success that will never fade, health that will never deteriorate. Yet, in the wisdom of the Buddha, it is precisely our resistance to impermanence that causes the deepest fear and suffering. To embrace peace, one must begin to embrace the truth that everything changes. And in that acceptance, fear begins to dissolve naturally, like mist in morning sunlight. Impermanence, or anicca in Pali, is one of the core marks of existence in Buddhist philosophy. Everything that arises is destined to pass. Every emotion, every thought, every situation, every body, every form, and even every spiritual insight is transient. This may sound like a grim perspective from the outside, but in truth, it is the very key to liberation. If things did not change, suffering would be eternal. If the mind were fixed in fear, there would be no hope of healing. But because all things are impermanent, there is hope, endless hope, for awakening and freedom. To truly embrace impermanence is not to utter it as a philosophical phrase. It is to feel it in the marrow of one's bones, to sit with it in meditation, to weep in its presence during loss, and to smile gently in its embrace during joy. Most people fear change because it threatens their illusion of control. We try to grasp, to fix, to make things last. We hoard love, we cling to youth, we replay memories in an attempt to hold on to something that by nature was never meant to be kept. And this grasping, this attempt to freeze time, is a great source of fear. We fear losing what we cling to, and in that fear, we lose our peace long before anything is actually taken from us. In the teachings of the Buddha, suffering arises from clinging. Clinging arises from ignorance, and ignorance persists because we do not look deeply into the nature of things. Impermanence is not a threat, it is a teacher. It teaches us to love more fiercely, to hold more gently, to appreciate the moment for what it is without needing it to be something else. It teaches us that nothing is promised, and therefore every breath is a miracle, every sunrise a gift, every conversation a fleeting but sacred exchange. When we come to understand that fear often arises because we try to preserve what cannot be preserved, we begin to soften. We begin to notice that our anxieties are rooted in an unconscious war against change. We fear aging because we see it as a loss, not as a natural unfolding. We fear death because we think it is the end, not realizing it is merely a transition in a vast, ever-flowing river of existence. We fear loss because we mistake ownership for love. But true love is spacious. It does not depend on possession or permanence. It flows in harmony with impermanence. Meditation on impermanence is one of the most powerful antidotes to fear. Sit quietly and reflect on the breath. Each inhale arises, each exhale disappears. No breath can be held, no breath can be saved for later. This is the truth of all things. If one lives in resistance to this truth, one will suffer. But if one aligns with it, accepts it, bows to it, then one finds a mysterious peace, not the peace of security, but the peace of inner freedom. Consider the changing seasons. Spring does not weep for the falling petals. Summer does not mourn the autumn winds. Winter does not cling to its frost. There is a rhythm to nature, and nature is wise. Humans, in their attempt to separate from the flow of life, create their own prisons of resistance. Fear thrives in this resistance. It feeds on the belief that change is dangerous, that endings are to be avoided, and that control is necessary for happiness. But Buddhist wisdom turns this logic upside down. It teaches that the more you surrender to the truth of change, the less you fear. You realize that you are not the fixed self you once believed in. You are a process, a becoming, a river in motion. Thoughts change, emotions rise and fall. The body is born, ages, and eventually dies. Yet within all this, there is a deeper awareness that is not threatened by change. It witnesses it. This awareness is what the Buddha pointed to. When we rest in this awareness, the world may change, but the fear no longer takes root. Letting go of the illusion of permanence does not mean becoming apathetic. On the contrary, it means engaging with life more fully. When you know the moment is fleeting, you give it your full attention. You listen deeply, you love completely, you forgive quickly, you appreciate more sincerely. You are present, not out of obligation, but out of reverence for the transient beauty of life. There is a story in the Buddhist tradition of a monk who carried a crystal bowl, a precious gift from a teacher. Every morning, he would look at the bowl and say, "This bowl is already broken." At first glance, this seems morbid, but the monk was not being pessimistic. He was reminding himself of the truth. One day the bowl would fall. One day it would shatter. By accepting that, he was able to enjoy the bowl completely while it lasted. He cleaned it, used it, admired it, but without attachment. And when it did finally break, he was not devastated. He had loved it while it lived, and he let it go when its time was done. This is the practice of impermanence. When applied to relationships, it fosters gratitude. When applied to success, it creates humility. When applied to fear, it dissolves the imagined future into the reality of now. People often ask, if nothing lasts, what's the point? The point is not to make things last. The point is to awaken, to see clearly, to touch life with presence. In impermanence, we are invited to live with urgency, but not anxiety, to care deeply, but without clinging, to walk gently, knowing that every step is unrepeatable. To practice embracing impermanence, start with awareness. Notice the small changes around you. The fading light of afternoon, the cooling of your tea, the shift of emotions in a conversation. Instead of resisting, notice. Instead of clinging, appreciate. Say to yourself, this too will pass, not as a curse, but as a blessing. This awareness builds resilience. It opens the heart. It prepares you for both joy and sorrow with equal grace. Impermanence also reveals that fear is based on illusion. We fear loss because we believe we can hold on. But the truth is, we never really had control to begin with. Once we release this illusion, What remains is liberation. We no longer waste energy trying to freeze time. We no longer suffer when things end. We understand that endings make room for new beginnings, that pain is not punishment but part of the rhythm, that death is not the opposite of life, but the partner of it. In Zen, they speak of the great death as the death of the false self. The ego, with its endless demands, its fear of change, its thirst for control, dies when we awaken to the truth of impermanence. And from that death, a new life begins, a life rooted in the present, a life that flows rather than grasps, a life that fears less because it trusts more. So if fear grips your heart today, ask yourself, what am I trying to hold on to? What am I unwilling to let change? What illusion of permanence am I defending? And in that inquiry, you may find the beginning of release. To embrace peace, you must bow to impermanence. You must allow things to arise and pass. You must trust that you can meet each moment freshly, without needing it to last forever. This is not resignation. It is sacred participation. It is the deepest form of love. It is the freedom to live without fear. If you feel that this teaching has opened something within you, some space, some breath, some realization, then consider subscribing to this channel. Each week, we continue this journey together, drawing from timeless Buddhist wisdom to illuminate the path of peace. Your presence matters. Your inner transformation matters. Let's walk this path together. Cultivating mindfulness to disarm. Fear at its root. In the quiet spaces of our lives, fear often whispers. It arises not only in the face of real danger, but in the imagined narratives that the mind constructs. These whispers grow into stories, and the stories into entire worlds of anxiety and avoidance. One of the most powerful antidotes to this mental construction is mindfulness, the practice of seeing clearly what is present without judgment, without distortion, and without resistance. In Buddhist philosophy, mindfulness is not merely a technique, but a way of being, a returning home to the direct experience of the here and now. And it is in this sacred return that fear loses its footing. Mindfulness is often described in modern times as awareness of the present moment. But in the teachings of the Buddha, it is much more than a passive observation of experience. It is an active, engaged awareness that recognizes what is arising in the body, mind, and heart with clarity and compassion. Fear is an emotion that thrives in unawareness. It grows in the shadows of the mind. When we are lost in thought, when we are distracted, when we are caught in our mental projections of what might happen, fear takes over. It convinces us that danger is imminent, that we are not safe, that we must react. But mindfulness, like a lantern in a dark room, reveals that much of what we fear is illusion. To understand how mindfulness disarms fear, we must first see how fear arises. A sound in the night, a sudden message, a look on someone's face, a memory from childhood, a thought about the future. These triggers activate the mind's protective mechanisms. The sympathetic nervous system is engaged. The heart races. The breath shortens. The muscles tense. But the event itself is not the cause of suffering. It is our unconscious reaction to it. We believe the thought. We resist the feeling. We fight against what is arising. And in that struggle, fear grows stronger. Mindfulness interrupts this cycle. It says pause and it says look again. It invites us to meet the fear directly without adding anything extra. In meditation, we sit with fear not to make it go away, but to become intimate with it. We feel its energy in the body. We observe the thoughts that accompany it. We watch how it arises, peaks, and eventually passes. This intimate awareness reveals that fear is not fixed, it is not solid. It is an impermanent wave in the ocean of consciousness, and once we see that, we are no longer at its mercy. The Buddha taught that mindfulness must be developed in 4 foundations: the body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. When we apply mindfulness to the body, we begin to notice the physical sensations of fear, tightness in the chest, knots in the stomach, trembling in the hands. We meet these sensations with curiosity, not resistance. We breathe into them. We allow them to exist. This simple act of noticing softens their intensity. When we apply mindfulness to feelings, we learn to name fear as a mental tone, unpleasant, without becoming entangled in the story it tells. When we bring mindfulness to the mind itself, we begin to see the patterns of thought that arise with fear, catastrophizing, judgment, helplessness. And when we look at mental objects, beliefs, views, perceptions, we start to dismantle the narratives that keep fear alive. This deep practice of mindfulness is not about analysis. It is about presence. It is not about fixing or escaping. It is about being with what is, as it is. And in this being with, something extraordinary happens. The energy that was once consumed by avoidance is now available for awareness. The habit of reacting is replaced by the capacity to respond. The inner space that was once filled with panic now becomes spacious, still, and wise. Many people ask, "How can I be mindful when I am afraid?" The answer is simple, though not always easy. Return to the breath. The breath is the anchor to the present moment. It is always with us. It does not judge. It does not rush. It simply moves. Like a faithful companion, when fear arises and the mind begins to spin, come back to the breath. Feel the inhale. Feel the exhale. Even if it is shaky or shallow, feel it. Let the breath be the doorway back to now. As you continue this practice, you begin to notice that fear is often a signal, not an enemy. It points to something within that needs care. Perhaps an old wound. Perhaps a belief that has never been questioned. Perhaps a longing for control in a world that offers none. Mindfulness allows us to hear this signal without reacting, to listen without fleeing, to care without collapsing. In Buddhist monastic tradition, practitioners often walk slowly through forests, barefoot and alert, practicing walking meditation. Each step is taken with full awareness. The foot touches the earth, the wind brushes the face, the sound of birds fills the air. There is no future in that moment, no past, just this step, and then the next. This is mindfulness in motion. And in this sacred walking, fear does not arise, or if it does, it is met with such intimacy that it dissolves. This same practice can be brought into daily life, washing dishes, speaking with a friend, driving a car, sitting in a meeting. Mindfulness is not limited to the cushion. It is a way of relating to every moment with full attention and open-heartedness. When fear creeps in during the day, we can pause and ask, what am I believing right now? What am I resisting? Can I feel this without needing it to go away? But these questions are not meant to be answered intellectually. They are meant to return us to presence. There is a beautiful teaching in the Theravada tradition that says, the mind is luminous, but it is defiled by visiting defilements. Fear is one such defilement, not because it is evil, but because it clouds our natural clarity. When mindfulness is cultivated, the mind returns to its luminous state, clear, steady, peaceful. And in that state we no longer need to escape fear. We understand it, we hold it, and we let it go. One of the most compassionate aspects of mindfulness is that it teaches us to be gentle. Fear is not to be fought with aggression. That only adds another layer of resistance. Instead, we learn to bow to it, to say, fear is here. I see you, I feel you, and I do not need to run. This bowing is powerful. It transforms fear from a monster into a messenger, from an enemy into a teacher. In the West, mindfulness has often been reduced to a stress reduction technique. While it certainly has that benefit, its true purpose in Buddhist practice is awakening. Awakening to the nature of reality. Awakening to the transient, interdependent, and non-self nature of all things. In this awakening, fear loses its grip because there is no longer a separate self to defend. There is only life, flowing, arising, and passing. Practicing mindfulness consistently is the key. It is not about perfection. It is about returning again and again. Every time you notice the mind has wandered, every time you notice fear has crept in, that is not failure, that is the practice. The moment of noticing is the moment of awakening. And the more we return, the more stable the mind becomes, the more courage grows, the more peace unfolds. Eventually, a great shift occurs. We no longer fear fear. We welcome it, not because we enjoy suffering, but because we know that fear is a path to deeper understanding. Each encounter with fear becomes a doorway to compassion, to presence, to insight. We begin to live from a place of spaciousness, no longer contracting in the face of difficulty. This spaciousness allows us to respond wisely to the world. We become less reactive, less prone to panic, less enslaved by old patterns. We can sit with uncertainty without needing to resolve it. We can walk into the unknown with an open heart. We can face pain without shutting down. This is not weakness. It is profound strength. Imagine a life where fear arises, and instead of running, you breathe, you pause, you feel, you respond with wisdom. This is not a fantasy. It is a possibility that is born from the steady practice of mindfulness. It is available to anyone, regardless of age, background, or belief. All it requires is your attention, your willingness, your presence. In this path, you become your own refuge, not because you are perfect, but because you are present. You do not need to control the world to feel safe. You do not need to eliminate all fear to feel peace. You simply need to be here now with what is. This is the gift of mindfulness. And it is a gift you can give yourself moment by moment, breath by breath. If this practice and its profound peace have touched you in any way, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Together, we explore these timeless teachings, supporting one another in the journey from fear to freedom. Let us continue to walk this sacred path, awake, mindful, and unafraid, letting go of attachment, the root of fear. At the core of human suffering lies a simple yet profoundly misunderstood truth. Attachment is the root of fear. This principle, found throughout Buddhist teachings, is not a condemnation of love, desire, or connection. Rather, it is an invitation to examine the ways in which clinging creates pain. Fear arises when we believe we cannot be whole without the object of our attachment. We fear losing it, we fear it changing, and we fear not having it at all. Whether it is a person, an idea, an identity, or a dream, the moment we grasp tightly, we open the door for fear to enter. The path of letting go is not about abandoning life, but about meeting it with open hands, free from the chains of possessiveness. And in this letting go, peace is found. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned to hold on. We cling to the breast, to security, to praise, to comfort. As we grow, our attachments evolve, but they do not disappear. We attach to roles, relationships, possessions, beliefs, and even spiritual ideals. These attachments shape our sense of self. We begin to believe we are defined by what we have, who we are to others, what we've accomplished, and what we hope to achieve. This constructed identity feels stable, but it is not. Life, in its unpredictable nature, threatens to take these things away. And when that threat appears, fear takes over. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering is tanha, often translated as thirst or craving. This craving is not limited to physical desires. It includes the craving for existence, the craving for non-existence, and the craving for certainty. We crave to be seen, to be loved, to be successful, to be safe. We crave permanence in an impermanent world. And this craving leads to attachment. We begin to say, "This is mine," or worse, "This is me." When the object of our attachment is threatened, the self feels threatened, and fear arises. One of the most insidious attachments is the attachment to the self-image. We build stories about who we are, strong, capable, intelligent, kind, and we become attached to being seen in a certain way. Any challenge to that image feels like an attack. We fear being misunderstood, being judged, being rejected. This fear shapes our behavior. We avoid risks, we hide our flaws, we manipulate situations to maintain control. But the image is not the reality, and the maintenance of that image becomes a burden. In relationships, attachment often masquerades as love, but love rooted in attachment is possessive, conditional, and fragile. It says, "I need you to behave a certain way so I can feel secure. I need you to stay the same so I don't feel abandoned. I need you to complete me so I don't feel empty." This is not true love. It is fear in disguise. True love allows freedom. It arises from fullness, not lack. It supports growth even when growth means change or distance. And it does not collapse when things end, because it was never based on possession. To begin the process of letting go, we must first see clearly what we are attached to. This requires honesty. What do you fear losing the most? What outcome are you trying to control? What identity are you clinging to? What story about your life must remain true for you to feel safe? These questions are not meant to shame or blame. They are doorways to liberation. When we name our attachments, we begin to loosen their grip. Meditation is a powerful tool in this inquiry. As we sit in stillness, attachments become visible. A thought arises. "I must succeed." A memory surfaces. "They betrayed me." A craving appears. "I want to feel important." These mental events are not problems. They are invitations. Each one points to a place of holding, and with awareness we can soften that hold. We can breathe into it. We can say, there is clinging here. And in that recognition, there is already a letting go. Letting go is not a one-time act. It is a lifelong practice. It happens again and again. Every time we notice ourselves tightening, grasping, resisting, we are invited to release. And every release is a return to freedom. It is important to understand that letting go does not mean indifference. It means engagement without clinging, care without control, presence without possession. It means trusting that life unfolds as it must, even when it does not follow our plans. One of the most powerful examples of non-attachment comes from the story of the Buddha himself. After attaining enlightenment, he taught for decades, offering wisdom to all who came to him. He had close disciples, deep connections, and great influence, but he never clung to any of it. When a student left, he did not chase them. When his community faced discord, he did not manipulate the outcome. When he was nearing death, he told his followers, "Be a lamp unto yourselves." He released even his role as teacher, trusting the Dharma to live on. This is the embodiment of letting go, not as loss, but as liberation. In modern life, we are surrounded by messages that promote attachment. Social media encourages comparison and identity performance. Consumer culture tells us that happiness lies in acquisition. Success is measured by status. Relationships are idealized. But Buddhist wisdom calls us to wake up from this trance. It says, you are not your possessions. You are not your achievements. You are not even your thoughts. You are awareness itself, vast, open, and ungraspable. When we live from this place, fear loses its foundation. There is no fixed identity to defend, no outcome that must occur, no person that must stay. We are free to meet life as it is, with curiosity and grace. We can love without needing. We can act without attachment to results. We can serve without seeking recognition. This is the path of the Bodhisattva, not withdrawing from the world, but engaging it fully without clinging. This path does not deny grief or loss. When something we love passes away, it is natural to mourn. But even in grief, we can let go. We can honor what was without needing it to remain. We can feel the pain without becoming the pain. We can trust that life continues even as it changes form. This trust is born not from naivety, but from deep insight into the nature of reality. Letting go also means forgiving. We often cling to past wounds, replaying them again and again. We believe that holding on to anger or resentment will protect us, but in truth, it only prolongs suffering. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is the release of the illusion that the past could have been different. It is the letting go of the need for revenge or justification, and it is one of the most courageous acts of the heart. To practice letting go, begin with small things. Notice where you tighten during the day. Is it when someone disagrees with you, when plans change, when you feel unseen? Take a breath. Soften the resistance. Say to yourself, I let this be as it is. Watch what happens. Over time, this becomes a habit, a new way of relating to life, one that is open, resilient, and free. In Buddhism, the highest form of letting go is the letting go of the illusion of self. This is not annihilation, it is awakening. The self we cling to is a construct made of thoughts, memories, roles, and preferences. It is useful for navigating the world, but it is not who we truly are. When we see through this illusion, fear dissolves completely. There is nothing to protect, nothing to lose, nothing to become. Only this moment, full and complete. This realization is not reserved for monks or mystics. It is available to anyone who turns inward with sincerity, anyone who questions their attachments, anyone who chooses presence over possession. It begins with a simple intention, to live with open hands, to trust the flow, to rest in the mystery. In a world filled with noise and pressure, this path may seem radical, but it is the path to peace, not a peace that depends on circumstances, but a peace that abides even when everything falls apart. It is the peace of letting go, the peace of not needing to grasp, the peace of meeting life with wonder instead of fear. If this reflection on the power of letting go has touched something in your heart, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Each teaching is offered as a step toward greater clarity, courage, and inner peace. By subscribing, you become part of a global community walking this path together. Let us continue to let go of fear and embrace the freedom that has always been waiting within us. Living with compassionate presence, transcending the fear of separation. To walk the path of inner peace is not to retreat from the world, but to enter it more fully, with eyes open and heart undefended. At the root of much human fear is a deep and unspoken belief that we are separate from others, from the world, from the sacred. This perceived separation creates a persistent anxiety, a background unease that colors all of our experiences. We fear being alone, being misunderstood, being unloved, being excluded. We fear abandonment, isolation, and ultimately annihilation. The Buddhist path points directly to the illusion of this separation and calls us back into the reality of interbeing. When we begin to live with compassionate presence, fear gives way to connection, tenderness, and a vast inner stillness that cannot be disturbed by external circumstances. The teachings of the Buddha emphasize that all things arise in dependence upon conditions. Nothing exists in isolation. A flower is not just a flower, it is the sun, the rain, the soil, the gardener, the air. The self is not an island. It is made of culture, parents, memories, biology, language, and so many invisible threads of influence. When we truly understand this, we see that our suffering is not ours alone, nor is our healing. Everything is connected. Everything is shared. The idea of a separate self collapses, and in its place, we find compassion, not as a practice imposed from morality, but as a natural expression of our shared being. To live with compassionate presence is to meet each moment with full attention and an open heart. It is to be fully here, not lost in past regrets or future anxieties, but grounded in the immediacy of life as it unfolds. Fear cannot survive in this field of presence. It may arise, but it is seen for what it is, an old echo, a protective reflex, not a truth. The present moment, when met fully, is rarely frightening. It is the stories we tell about what might happen that generate panic. Compassionate presence interrupts this cycle. It brings us back to the body, to the breath, to the eyes of the person in front of us, to the sensations of now. In this return, we remember that we are not alone. We are part of something vast, mysterious, and beautiful. Fear often causes us to contract, to shrink into ourselves, to close off, to become rigid. Compassion does the opposite. It expands, it softens, it dissolves the imaginary boundary between self and other. When we meet another's suffering with compassion, our own fear lessens. We recognize their pain as familiar. We realize we are not the only ones struggling. This shared recognition creates space for understanding, for connection, for healing. It is difficult to remain afraid when we are connected to others in the heart. The cultivation of compassion begins with ourselves. Many people carry deep self-judgment. They fear their own imperfections, their own histories, their own emotional wounds. This fear keeps them trapped in cycles of shame and avoidance. But Buddhist practice teaches us to turn toward ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a dear friend. When we meet our own pain with compassion, we are no longer at war with ourselves. This inner peace radiates outward. It informs the way we speak, listen, work, and live. In meditation, we often begin with mindfulness, watching the breath, observing thoughts. But gradually, compassion arises. Sometimes we practice phrases like, "May I be safe, may I be well, may I live with ease." Other times, we simply place a hand over the heart and breathe gently. These are not sentimental acts, they are radical reorientations. In a world that often teaches us to be hard, competitive, and self-critical, compassion is a revolution. And it is a revolution that directly heals fear. When we are afraid, we often believe we must protect ourselves by closing down. But in truth, the more we close, the more isolated we feel. The more isolated we feel, the more afraid we become. The way out of this loop is to open, to risk vulnerability, to choose presence over withdrawal. Compassionate presence is not always comfortable. It asks us to feel more, not less. It invites us into the tenderness of being human. But in this vulnerability, there is power. The power to remain steady in chaos. The power to care even when it hurts. The power to love without clinging. The great teachers of the Buddhist tradition embodied this presence. Think of the Dalai Lama, whose entire nation was taken from him, yet who meets each person with warmth and laughter. Think of Thich Nhat Hanh, who walked through the horrors of war, yet spoke with the gentlest voice. Think of the Buddha himself, who faced temptation, rejection, and misunderstanding, yet sat in unwavering stillness beneath the Bodhi tree. These beings were not fearless because life spared them pain. They were fearless because they met that pain with compassionate awareness. In daily life, we can cultivate this presence in simple ways. When you listen to someone, really listen. Let go of your rehearsed responses. Let go of your need to fix. Just be there. When you feel overwhelmed, place your attention in the breath. Soften the shoulders. Feel the ground beneath you. Remind yourself, I am here. This is enough. When you find yourself judging someone, whether it is a stranger or someone close. Pause. Ask, what pain might they be carrying? Not to excuse harmful behavior, but to understand its roots. Compassion is not passivity. It is clarity with kindness. It sees the full picture. Living with compassionate presence also means honoring boundaries. Sometimes we fear saying no because we do not want to lose connection. But true compassion includes ourselves. It is not compassionate to abandon our truth for the sake of harmony. Presence teaches us to act from love, not from fear, to speak with honesty, to choose with care, to engage with integrity. In this way, our lives become expressions of the Dharma, not just in meditation halls, but in kitchens, boardrooms, streets, and homes. There will be moments when fear returns. Perhaps you lose something precious. Perhaps you face illness or injustice. Perhaps you stand at the edge of the unknown. In those moments, remember this: you are not the fear. You are the one who sees the fear. You are the awareness that holds it. And in that awareness, you are vast. You are connected. You are whole. The fear may speak, but it does not define you. It may rise, but it will pass. What remains is your presence, steady, compassionate, and free. This final step in the path is not an ending. It is a beginning, a way of living, a daily choice to meet the world with openness, to move from fear to connection, from protection to participation, from surviving to living fully. This is the invitation of the Buddha, not to escape life, but to enter it so completely that nothing is left untouched by love. If this journey has spoken to your heart, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we walk together in the light of ancient wisdom, learning how to live with courage, clarity, and compassion. Your presence matters, your growth matters. Together we are dissolving fear, not by force but by presence, not by running but by standing still. Join us and let peace become your path.